Let's listen into ARK Invest's Tesla Robotaxi Revolution brainstorm.
The other interesting thing about looking at the Robotaxi app was the 10th most downloaded ride-hail app day of all time on this random Thursday. The other top 9 are basically New Year's Eve, Halloween, St. Patrick's Day, and then a UFC fight that did a bunch of volume. So basically evenings where people go out to bars and drink a lot. And it made me think about kind of how, meeting surge demand is not only important for kind of having a complete service and so people can rely on you for their commute, but it also, that is where these companies acquire most of their customers, or the biggest customer acquisition days are when they can meet that abnormal like spike in demand. And the only way to do that is if you can motivate in supply so that, and even on New Year's Eve, it's hard to get an Uber, but I'm sure it'll be impossible to get a Waymo. And so the completeness of Tesla's package is going to be not just taking the drivers out, but also allowing Joe Schmo Tesla owner to stick their FSD capable vehicle onto the service during.
This is a very important point. And for the non-native English speakers in the audience, he was referring to surge, S-U-R-G-E, not S-E-A-R-C-H, search. A surge in demand, pointing out that if you don't have a massive scale and you can't meet surge demand, you have a pretty useless service when people need it most. Let's take a moment to talk about the brilliance of Tesla's strategy. If you can't meet peak demand, you have a novelty, not a useful service. Every time I post a video publicly, there are new viewers, so let me explain as if you are a new viewer, and hello to those who are actually new. 12-ish months, maybe a little bit longer from now, Tesla will begin mass production of a dedicated robotaxi called the Cybercab, a 2-seater vehicle which will cater to almost everybody using ride-hail. They'll make a fuckload of these, they'll be super efficient, super low cost. However, it will also be possible for customers who've purchased a Tesla vehicle for their own personal private use in the future to add their vehicle to Tesla's robotaxi fleet at any point. Tesla will obviously take a cut of the fares, but then the owner of the Tesla vehicle, which is out autonomously picking up and dropping off people, will also be making money while they sleep, while they're at work, whatever. It's an autonomous money printer. The reason this is so brilliant is because Tesla already has a fleet of many millions, roughly 8 million vehicles on roads today, growing at roughly 2 million a year, that in the future, in theory, can become temporary additions or permanent additions to the global robotaxi fleet. And the way surge pricing works with apps like Uber is that the actual price to use the service will skyrocket if there's an enormous imbalance between supply, e.g. Ubers, and demand. What this will mean is the financial incentive for a Tesla owner to add their vehicle to the fleet during peak usage time, peak demand, surge times. The financial incentive will match demand. Imagine it is New Year's Eve. You're hosting a house party. You don't need your vehicle. It's parked in a garage. Phone pings. Add your Tesla vehicle to the Robotaxi app. Current surge rates indicate that you'll be making $600 trillion per mile. Bam. What this creates is an extremely fluid Robotaxi fleet for Tesla. In situations where there is a massive increase in demand and not enough vehicles that Tesla personally owns or dedicated cybercabs that other people are operating in the network, in those moments, Tesla owners will be incentivized with much higher than usual rates per mile to add their vehicles temporarily to the fleet. Brett pointed out that New Year's Eve, getting a Waymo, impossible. He's right, tiny fleet doesn't matter what they're charging, they just simply do not have enough hardware, e.g. vehicles on roads, to meet crazy surges in demand. But Tesla already has millions of latent potential robotaxis in customer driveways, garages, and parking lots around the world. It's going to be borderline impossible for Uber, traditional taxis, Waymo, anybody to compete with Tesla when they already have massive scale and the ability for customers to add vehicles to the fleet anytime they wish, and Tesla having the ability to dynamically match pricing and incentivize their Tesla owners to add their vehicles to the fleet based on demand.
I think that surge point is super interesting. It also kind of ties into probably something we got wrong on EV range like 8 years ago at this point, right? Which is, it's like no one ever needs peak range, but it's like meeting that quote surge demand is super important from consumer perspective. Okay, and then when Tesla removes safety drivers, do you think that is the start of rapid expansion, or you think that's the start of phase 2 of cautious testing that then, is maybe 3 to 6 months ahead of rapid scaling?
No, I think that's the start of rapid scaling. I think that would, I don't know why you would hold back at that point. When do each of you think they're going to release safety drivers? Sam, the expert, and Nick, the person who's heard us argue about this for years.
7 years.
I think
Same argument. 7 years.
7 years.
That's how long I've been listening to this.
That's a fair point. But you can't fault someone for continuing to make progress towards a goal, whereas everyone else has quit. I think Q1 is the right time frame. Right? It's like Elon time. You got to push people. You do need the release. You need the validation. It's still unclear, right? They said they're increasing their fleet by 50% in Austin. And so, prior to that, the reported number was something like 7,000 miles of data collected. You have to imagine to remove safety drivers, they're going to want a lot more. I'd say probably, is it fair? Maybe 2 orders of magnitude more data than that to really be comfortable with it. And maybe they can be safe with that because of the fleet of vehicles and they know what's going to be happening or the extent that it's rolled out in SF. But that's kind of how I've been thinking about it.
Yeah, it would be interesting to approach it from like how many miles do we think they need before they could statistically be confident that they're safe. The thing that, because when Waymo, got commercial licensing in California, I didn't think they had statistically enough data to really know how safe they were. You can imagine, like in drug trial design, depending on how powerful your effect is, you can get by with less data, still saying, I assert that I'm better than human. And then here, it's kind of like maybe you can see the shape of your risk profile. And you can say, oh, I can see the entire risk profile, even including these long tail events that I can't yet measure, is like kind of like to the right of normal driving. And so maybe there's ways that via simulation and looking at kind of like the overall curve, you can make assertions that you're safer. And I think 1Q or 2Q, even a year from now, from a present value of Tesla perspective, it actually doesn't matter at this point. It matters if it's 7 years, which is Nick's.
What a great time to pause. I'm laughing only because the expression on Nick's face there. But Brett's got a good point here. A few months, a few quarters, a year or so makes no difference whatsoever. A few quarters either way isn't going to move the needle. But here's the perfect world scenario. If I had a magic wand, we know that Tesla's going to begin ramping production on their dedicated Robotaxi, the Cybercab, call it 12-ish months from now. By the time this thing actually hits high volume production, we could be looking at 18, 24 plus months. Ideal scenario, perfect world. Tesla is able to deploy these vehicles autonomously without the need, or more likely the conservative decision, to have a Tesla employee sitting in the passenger seat or behind the wheel doing nothing just in case. Because that means the limiting factor to Robotaxi supply is production of the Cybercab. It's okay at low volume for a Tesla employee to be sitting in these vehicles. I mean, at worst, it's basically comparable to your total overhead for an actual taxi or an actual Uber with an actual human driver. But for Tesla to reach a massive scale, offer an extremely competitive cost per mile, blow open this entire market and make crazy money, obviously, it can't have people, Tesla employees, sitting in the vehicles. In short, perfect world, Tesla has, call it 12, 18, at most 24 months to reach a place of confidence with enough data on the safety profile of their vehicles. They start removing the human supervisor / babysitter before it will be a slight impediment to massive scale. My personal hunch is that it's going to happen a lot sooner than that. As I keep mentioning, we've still yet to see a single safety critical incident caught on film in a Tesla Robotaxi operating anywhere today.
I don't think it's going to be 7 years. I was giving you a frame of reference of how many years I've heard going to be next year.
Yeah, but we've switched. We've gone from next year to this year. Although Brett just introduced.
No, technically Brett is into
next
year.
Yeah,
Brett is into next year.
I think there are technologies that are forever out and to the right. Quantum computing, I think, is in that land. Fusion is, and in some ways the wager we've made against the market is that, Robotaxi on vision-only sensors on commercially available vehicles is not in that land. It's going to commercialize. I think there is wildly abundant evidence that we're going to cross the threshold, and we're going to cross it, very likely in the next 12 months. Put it that way.
So then,
and
question, right? Another piece of Tesla Elon news, $1 trillion-ish pay package. Do you think then that it's like 3 years from now, people are like, wow, I can't believe they just gave Elon $1 trillion?
I mean, I think it's worth it to have him engaged. And it's all of these headline numbers are conditioned on the company doing unprecedented levels.
But that's what I'm
of growth.
saying. It's like, if you look at our model and Robotaxi works in the way we think it will, it's like they should clear these hurdles.
Yes, I think they will.
Yeah.
I think he will, he's not getting paid $1 trillion cash. He's getting additional stock, which gives him additional kind of voting control over the company. And so you should think about it not as the dollar figure, but how much control has Elon earned of Tesla's strategic direction. And the difference is, it's the difference between, kind of like, hey, we've delivered Robotaxi, now let's just execute on like maximizing cash flow out of that. And suddenly we're doing buybacks and paying out dividends. Or, hey, we've delivered Robotaxi, so now let's, push most but not all of the chips into Optimus and create kind of a sustainable, abundant future for the world. I really think that's like the forking path here. You could have a wildly valuable company that was satisfied to just produce a bunch of Robotaxis and scrape cash flow off it and penetrate everywhere in the world. And I think it requires the continued mania, urgency, and insane ambition of Elon to actually deliver and dominate the humanoid robot market. And, it is a bigger opportunity, frankly. So I think you're buying the option value on that and the option value on him pushing the company into that. And so even relative to kind of like this value creation event that we think Robotaxi is going to occur or unveil for Tesla, the trillion should be measured against the enterprise value creation of Optimus.
So then,
I like the concept of having an option, a call option on Tesla being successful with Optimus humanoid robots built in to Tesla stock. Autonomy will utterly dwarf Tesla's existing business. Consumer vehicles, energy, everything. Dwarf it. And if successful, Optimus at scale will dwarf autonomy. What's the value today of owning a never expiring option on Tesla's potential success with humanoid robots at scale?
We're going to keep punting Nick's response to the answer as we get out of Brett here. Okay, we currently have the crazy CapEx cycle going into compute. Let's say 5 years from now, Robotaxi up and running at scale. Is everyone like, oh my God, I can't believe Tesla's not free cash flow, like that they've reinvested.
Oh, because they're continuing to throw money into compute.
That they've reinvested singularly more than this whole cycle combined into compute for Optimus?
I think there's a few reasons that wouldn't occur. One, Robotaxi should be so cash flowy for them. It's almost impossible for them to put the money into. We're talking at least on our modeling hundreds of billions of dollars per year in cash flow.
And for clarification, my own model, similar numbers, and importantly, the 2025 CEO Performance Award currently proposed. Tesla shareholders voting on this soon, itself requires for the final tranche that Tesla does $400 billion plus of EBITDA, aka profits, in a single year. Now, I may not be particularly imaginative, but I can't conceive of a realistic scenario in which Tesla could actually invest/spend $400 billion in a single year. This has always been my long-term thesis for Tesla. At some point, the company's printing so much money, they can't possibly spend it all. So what do you do with it? And the answer is, well, you can pile it up, then everyone's going to point and laugh and go, what do you think, you're Apple? Or you can return some of it to shareholders via dividends. Now, to be clear, you have to account for unknown unknowns, shit hitting the fan, future investments, blah, blah, blah. But at some point, there's a surplus beyond that. If you're printing hundreds of billions of dollars a year, what do you do with that capital, the cash?
You cannot possibly, as a single entity, invest that much multiple years in a row in compute. And I think that, maybe you can, but maybe it doesn't manifest in data centers. You're investing it and building out the actual robots, which have kind of the inference chip on device, and they're out there learning in the world. And so the challenge, I think, with the data center build out the overarching concern is you have these giant buildings filled with lots of chips. And at some point you skate over the edge of you have too many buildings and chips, and they're not much good for anything else. And so then suddenly, you've spent $40 billion building a building and it turns out it's worth 20. That's a bad trade. With the robots themselves, if you're doing your training on the end asset, then at least it's out there picking up trash for people, and you can generate service revenue off it. So I think that the way in which the build out moves through kind of these inference chips will probably be more healthy, but I think they are going to be constrained by factors other than capital in terms of pursuing Optimus. It's not going to be cash flow constraint. It's going to be, can we get these things working well enough to sell them in enough to get the virtuous cycle going? Yes, you can throw lots of money at compute trying to do that, but the cash flow of Robotaxi is well in excess of what you could meaningfully output into chips.
Nick.
I forgot what the question was.
Drivers out, win.
Oh, I would go back to, I think, one part of your answer, Brett, which I don't necessarily think it matters when driver is out in Austin. And to me, it's, just a part of the story. And if you have drivers out in Austin, then when you go and launch in Miami, you're going to need drivers in. So it's just a part of how you have to launch this program, it seems.
Have you ever been to Florida?
Yeah,
they just let you do
I
anything
lived there for 3 years.
Yes, exactly. You can just do anything there. You could
sure
alligator behind the wheel.
Oh, but okay. So Miami, bad example. New York City, you're going to need drivers. My question is more, the story in some ways when we talk about it. It seems like we talk about it, and then we have this moment in time where the business inflects massively when drivers can, unleash their cars onto the road. And I maybe take a more conservative approach where I don't necessarily think there's going to be a hockey stick moment just because of how we're seeing this launch currently. I think it'll be just a steady ramp, and it will be a phenomenal business, but I think it will look more like a steady ramp of you have to go city by city and then unlock unless something drastically changes. And it sounds like, I think they are trying to reshape the regulatory landscape from the top down at the federal level. And I think that's probably more important than driver in, driver out, this city or that city. It's, when can you actually unlock this from all of the loopholes and hoops you have to jump through now to be able to go and put this service, because it works, right? Like you both were there with Frank. It works.
So I'm going to take the other side on this. Strongly disagree. I think once Tesla reaches a point where they themselves have enough data to be extremely confident their vehicles are operating in a particular city in a region at a much safer than human level. At that point, when they remove the Tesla employee sitting in the passenger seat or behind the wheel doing nothing, there's no reason for them to not immediately saturate the entire city, that particular market, that region, that geography, with as many Tesla robotaxis as is necessary to meet all ride-hail demand for that city and own the entire market. I strongly suspect a couple of years from now, people are going to look back at how quickly Tesla scaled their robotaxi fleet in the US and globally, and have but two words: holy fuck.
Everyone knows it works. Waymo's been doing it for a while. Tesla's doing it now. So it's happening. But the question is, how do you go from these small cities, or not, they're not small cities, but these programs that are small now to nation? And I think it's more from a regulatory framework than just getting it to work.
But I think a mistake that I think everyone is making is misunderstanding the size of the market, even in the individual cities, as you get into the $1 a mile range. And so and I think in their announced plans, they've said they're going to be able to hit 50% of the population by, Sam, did they? I think they said some date.
End of year.
End of year. So they're going to be in states that allow them to hit 50% of the population. We think as you go to $1 a mile, this is $1 trillion market, right? And so even if you're offsides in New York, can't go in New York. Okay, that's like, you can't, you have to have somebody pump your gas in New Jersey. It's dumb. It'll erode faster than the, somebody pumps your gas in New Jersey thing. But there will be plenty of places to put output of the factory to kind of service this robotaxi demand that I think will be unveiled. And these download numbers are partly testament.
But you also, there's probably a massive caveat, and we'll be in 50 or states that represent 50% of the population. They're already in Texas and California. So what's that? That's like a quarter of the U.S. alone, but they're not.
Yeah, but in a lot of states, like licensed to operate in the state confers license to operate in any city.
Yeah.
You know, so there are special purpose cities where they've tried to defend their taxi franchise against Uber, and they've imposed all these regulations that, you know, are kind of annoying and actually, you know, cause more cost to travel for people.
Yeah. And I agree with you on end markets. You know, I've also been listening and watching the research for that 7 years as well. And I know how much work has been put into it. And I fully believe in the end target. I just think the slope is, you know, call it this instead of that.
My belief is that I think people also over-index on Waymo, where Waymo has severely restricted supply of vehicles for a long time. They're still trying to ramp it. They've done so for somewhat obscure or obfuscated reasons. Like, we think they might be gross profit negative per mile. They have high churn rate, as I said. They have a lot of maintenance, I think recurring maintenance they have to do on the vehicles. So it's operationally hard to scale it. And Tesla should be in a very different spot than Waymo. I mean, literally, we were in Austin and the vehicle drives off the factory and drives off without a driver behind it, to go to a parking lot to then be sold to a customer. But if it can just go directly into commercial service, that's your ability to turn a switch and be like, okay, we're going to flood this market with 50,000 taxis, is substantially different.
He's right, and this is very important. I also think a lot of people massively overestimate the number of vehicles required to completely saturate a market. Another thing that a lot of people don't seem to understand is how quickly a dedicated robotaxi operating full-time can cover its entire production cost in profits by driving customers around. I've done these numbers before. Let's do them again. Imagine that Tesla's charging $2 a mile. They're making a mere 25% profit on that. So 50 cents per mile profit. It's likely to be much more, but very conservative numbers. If a Tesla robotaxi does a typical number of miles per year comparable to a full-time taxi or Uber, call it 50,000 miles, and it costs Tesla just $25,000 to produce the dedicated robotaxi. 12 months after it rolls off production lines and begins commercial operation, it's covered its entire cost. 100% return on investment in a single year with very conservative estimates.
And by the way, we're going to do all of Texas. We start in Austin and then just it kind of one of those viral outbreak kind of movies where they show the overhead map of the spread. I imagine something like that, where it's just the entire U.S. gets infected.
Okay,
quite quickly.
Last question here. Well, and then a last question for Nick. Okay, U.S. consumption, household consumption, right? You look at the categories, housing, transportation, clothing, yada yada yada. It's those buckets stay roughly the same on a percentage basis, right? They're fairly robust. We're about to cut the cost of transport dramatically. So are people just going to take way more rides and spend the same amount on transportation? Are they going to move further out? Or is this going to be a fundamental shift in that bucket with excess spilling over into other categories? Nick, you just shook your head down. You give us your opinion.
Well, I mean, I think, and you may have the answer to this. What are, one, in the US, the car is it represents freedom for people, right? We've been brainwashed by years and years of programming to believe that if you own a car, you have ultimate freedom in the US, and great job by Big Car for doing so. And I think the idea that just because it's cheaper, because there's the cost and then there's the convenience of accessing that cost. As in, I want to go right now to the grocery store. Is it more convenient for me to just walk to my car and drive to the grocery store than call the car, have it come get me, then I have to call another one or have it wait there? That to me is the big hurdle. And that's something where you have to change consumer preference. You have to rewire everyone's brain to be you actually don't need a car anymore because the cost is so much lower. But then people are going to go, yeah, the cost is lower, but I won't have access to the car. I'm going to have to always be waiting for it. And I can't just get in, getting in your car and being able to go. Again, we've been brainwashed to that's the ultimate sign of freedom. And so I think that's going to be really hard to erode just because the cost is cheap. And so that's where
I think you're right and you're wrong. As in, I 100% agree that it's not just a cost issue, it's a defrictioning issue.
Right.
And people will in all kinds of circumstances, effectively pay more to maintain an old habit than like do something that's even better for less. And I think that it's a very different market with abundant supply, as in, like the difference between a $3 a mile ride hail service and a $1 a mile ride hail service is indicates the number of vehicles that you have out there. And so the 5 to 10 minute wait for an Uber becomes a 1 to 2 minute wait. And so it onboards people not just on hey, it's lower cost, but it also feels less frictionful. And then the way off, depending on the city, is when you get there, are you having to figure out parking? And are you, like that's a big deal. Certainly in Los Angeles, it's like, I have to go to this place. The parking lot there sucks. I'm going to try to street park. I spend an extra 5 minutes trying to street park. I'm going to illegally park and take the probabilistic odds that I get a parking ticket. Like there's a whole like raft of factors that are less convenient. But it's like, if you have a car seat, are you going to want to like put your car seat into these cars? Probably not. I think there's lots of people who will be off sides of the market for a little while as its supply builds out. But there is, on a pure financialist basis, the as you get down into the 50 cents a mile, that's like almost the cash cost of running a car that you've fully paid off. So the marginal person stops buying a car, and people are more likely to just leave their car in the garage and go on the service. And I think, Sam, to your question, I think that you will spend roughly the same bucket amount as percent of personal consumption on transportation, but you'll just end up a lot more in point-to-point travel. I'm not going to take public transit. Why would you bother? It's like just as expensive per mile, and you have to deal with other people. You're not going to take the hour-and-a-half flight because that requires 3 hours all in airport and everything. You're just going to get in a Robotaxi and go. And so kind of there's going to be this. You're gonna choose to move out of town because the commute is actually something that you can work during the commute, as opposed to before where it's like, I have to like eat, I turn my brain to mush listening to podcasts like this because of the length of my commute instead of working. So I think that people will make choices around transportation where they end up traveling more miles and end up with same share of consumption income against it. But I think the capital mix people have will change. As in right now, people have, if you buy a new car, you have $50,000 worth of capital like soaked up in that car. You're taking a loan against it. So it's not just the kind of the ongoing amortized cost of that, but the kind of amount of savings you have to jump into that category. And I think that frees up and goes somewhere else to a humanoid robot down the road. And that's how kind of like the mix changes.
So the world's more connected than ever, and at the same time will be more isolated than ever until the Tesla Robotaxi dating app comes out, where you get to share a one-way ride date.
Oh gosh, I need the app that allows me to avoid the dating app ride.
So very interesting discussion. I tend to agree with just about everything that Brett said. In particular, he does have a point. Initially, there will be some people who delay adopting transport as a service, robotaxis, those who have the choice, as opposed to people that today their only option is unreliable and extremely unsafe, at least in some cities, public transportation. But the cost of a dedicated robotaxi, safe, private, secure, convenient, matches or becomes even more affordable than public transport. I mean, hello, captive audience. Others will take longer to adopt, but over the long term, cost of robotaxis will be dramatically lower than public transportation and or personal vehicle ownership. And at that point, most people will be frequent users of cheap, fast, convenient, safe, autonomous vehicles. Brett also made an interesting point that I've raised myself many times in the past about domestic airfares and travel. A short flight may only take 45 minutes in the air, but when you factor in travel to the airport, getting through security, boarding, waiting, delays, disembarking, getting from the airport to where you're going, many people will find for short domestic flights that it's cheaper and faster to take a robotaxi than it is to fly. People may be spending comparable amounts on transport in the future, but probably a hell of a lot less on domestic flights. The thing about massive disruption and change is that people tend not to see it coming, and then all of a sudden it's already happened. Want more content? Early access? A bunch of perks? Click the links in the pinned comment. AG1 is awesome. I've been taking it daily now for more than 3 years. It's a great way to fill in nutritional gaps. It's packed full of vitamins, minerals, and whole food source nutrients, plus has prebiotics, probiotics, and adaptogens to improve gut health, regularity, and help your body handle stress. I'm always looking for an edge to help me feel and perform my best, which is why I haven't missed a day of AG1 for more than 3 years. Just try it and see how you feel. Click the link in the pinned comment or head to drinkag1.com/SMR and get yourself a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3 plus K2 and 5 travel packs.